She walked into her own bank, and they treated her like a criminal. What started as a simple withdrawal spiraled into humiliation, suspicion, and a confrontation no one saw coming. But when she revealed who she really was, the entire room fell silent. So who was she, and why did it shake the entire branch to its core? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Olivia Bennet stepped through the glass doors of the Bennet Financial branch with little fanfare. No entourage, no tailored suit, no air of authority trailing behind her. She wore sneakers, a simple cardigan, and jeans that spoke of comfort, not command. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the polished marble floors, golden light glinting off the brass trim that lined the teller counters. Most people who walked into this bank saw it as just another financial institution. But to Olivia, it was something far more personal. This was her legacy. She had founded Bennet Financial with nothing but grit, vision, and a belief that banking could be fair, human, and dignified. She had chosen this branch's location, approved the blueprint, and stood at this very doorway the day it opened, ribbon-cutting scissors in hand. And now, years later, she walked in not as the CEO, but as a customer. No meetings, no announcements, just a quiet transaction, one personal withdrawal from her own account. She wanted to see how her staff treated people when no titles were spoken, when faces were unfamiliar. She believed true integrity lived in the unnoticed moments, the ones not caught on camera or praised in quarterly reports. The lobby was quiet, humming with the soft murmur of printers and hushed conversations. Olivia made her way to the counter, her footsteps light but confident. Behind the counter sat a young teller, Emily Carter, eyes locked on her computer screen, typing briskly. She didn't look up, not even a smile, not even a hello. Olivia waited, then cleared her throat. "Hi," she said gently. "I'd like to make a withdrawal." Emily, still without meeting her gaze, slid a clipboard across the counter. "Fill this out, please." Olivia's brow lifted slightly. No courtesy, no warmth, just procedure, handed out like an inconvenience. She took the clipboard anyway and jotted down the amount, $5,000. A modest withdrawal for her, but more than enough to make most banks double-check ID. She slid it back to Emily along with her license, watching closely now. Emily's eyes flicked across the form, then stopped. Something shifted. The young woman froze for just a breath before glancing up at Olivia, a subtle tension tightening her features. Then came the words that made Olivia's stomach turn. "Can you hold on a second?" Emily said quietly, already walking away with her ID in hand toward the manager's office. Minutes passed. Olivia stood there, calm on the outside, but with a tightness forming just beneath her chest. She had no desire for special treatment, but what she was feeling now wasn't professionalism, it was suspicion. And it wasn't based on protocol. It was based on perception. She'd seen this before, far too many times, but never here, not in the bank that bore her name. The frosted glass door opened, and out stepped the branch manager, Thomas Greer, with Emily trailing behind him like a shadow. Thomas wore a crisp suit, too formal for a late Friday, and a manufactured smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon," he greeted stiffly, giving Olivia a once-over, his gaze lingering not on her face but on her outfit. "Miss Bennet, is it?" She nodded once, cool and unshaken. "That's correct. I'm making a withdrawal. The form is already filled out and your teller has my ID." Thomas took the clipboard from Emily and scanned it, then picked up her ID, holding it up to the light. Olivia stood still, watching him examine it as if it might dissolve in his hand. He turned it over once, twice. His jaw clenched suddenly. $5,000, he repeated slowly, as though it was an absurd sum. "And this is a personal account?" "Yes," Olivia replied, her tone steady. "All the information is right there." Thomas's lips tightened. "And what do you do for a living, Miss Bennet?" Olivia's eyes narrowed. "I work in finance." "That's a broad field," he replied, as if fishing for something more specific. "Are you employed locally?" "I run a bank," she said. "This bank, actually." Thomas blinked but didn't falter. He handed the ID back to Emily without acknowledging her words. "Well," he said, still performing neutrality, "we'll just need to verify a few more details before we can process the transaction." "You have my identification," Olivia said, her voice growing sharper, "and my account number. I've been banking here since this branch opened." Thomas nodded, unmoved. "Yes, but for larger transactions, we occasionally ask for additional verification." "Occasionally?" Olivia repeated, arching a brow. "Or only when someone doesn't look the part?" The silence that followed was heavier than any noise could have been. Emily shifted nervously behind the counter, her fingers fumbling with a pen she wasn't using. Thomas's face didn't change, but Olivia saw the truth in his hesitation. This wasn't about bank policy. It was about optics, about assumptions. And it was about to backfire in a way neither of them saw coming. Olivia Bennet remained rooted to the marble floor, her jaw tight, her voice unwavering, though the insult behind Thomas's question still rang in her ears. What kind of bank? As though her earlier answer hadn't been clear, as though the very concept of her owning and running a financial institution was laughable. She didn't need confirmation. She had felt the shift the moment Thomas entered the room. His overly cautious inspection of her ID, the redundant questions, the way he seemed to test her composure at every step. It was all wrapped in the quiet, patronizing tone of someone who had already made up his mind about her, not based on data, not on policy, but on appearance, on assumption. Thomas set the clipboard on the counter again and said with a rehearsed calmness, "Just to be thorough, can you confirm the amount of your last deposit into this account?" Olivia blinked. "That's not standard policy. I've never been asked that before, and I doubt you ask every customer withdrawing $5,000 to recite their deposit history." Thomas gave a smooth, dismissive nod. "We take security seriously." "No," Olivia replied, her voice sharpened by steel now. "What you're taking seriously is the fact that I walked in here in sneakers instead of heels, that I'm not wearing a tailored blazer or carrying a briefcase. You saw a black woman in a cardigan and made assumptions." There it was. A collective pause spread across the lobby, subtle but unmistakable. Nearby customers shifted in their seats. A woman in a blue dress lowered her phone, mid-text. Even Emily looked up, eyes wide, breath caught in her throat. Thomas's carefully controlled expression cracked just slightly. "Miss Bennet, I assure you—" "You don't need to assure me of anything," Olivia cut in, stepping slightly closer to the counter. "What you need to do is treat me like every other client who walks through these doors." Thomas's fingers twitched over the clipboard. "If you'd like to wait a moment, I can have someone—" "I'm done waiting." With a calm precision born from years of boardroom battles, Olivia reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet, flipping it open to reveal a business card encased in clear plastic. She tapped it against the counter. "Olivia Bennet, CEO and founder of Bennet Financial Group. This branch exists because I made it happen." The words landed with the force of a gavel. Emily gasped audibly. Thomas paled. "I hired the regional manager who hired you," Olivia continued. "I signed off on every dollar that funded this building. I sat on that side of the desk when we opened this location, welcoming the first customers through these doors." Silence. Absolute silence. Thomas's voice, when it returned, was thin. "I wasn't aware." "Clearly," Olivia said coldly, "you weren't." She wasn't raising her voice. She didn't need to. She had already shattered the illusion that his authority had any weight in her presence. The silence that followed Olivia's declaration was absolute, thick enough to press against the walls of the bank. For a moment, all that could be heard was the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant clicking of a keyboard from a teller 2 desks away, who had clearly stopped pretending not to listen. Thomas stood frozen behind the counter, eyes locked on the business card now resting like a blade between them, his lips parted as though he might say something to salvage his dignity, but no sound came out. Olivia didn't blink. Her posture was composed, but her gaze was fierce, unyielding. She had spent a lifetime navigating moments like this. Boardrooms where her competence was second-guessed. Interviews where her leadership was diminished to diversity. Meetings where her ideas were validated only after a man repeated them. But this was different. This was her own creation. Her name was on the documents that built this institution. Her signature opened this branch. And yet, standing in its lobby, she had been made to feel like an imposter. Emily, the teller who had watched the scene unfold with wide eyes, now looked visibly uncomfortable. She stepped back slightly, her hands fumbling with a pen, as if unsure of whether to assist or disappear. Olivia turned to her. "You had my ID. You saw my account number. Why didn't you just process the withdrawal?" Emily swallowed, eyes flicking to Thomas, who still stood motionless. I thought maybe it needed manager approval. Because of the amount," she mumbled. "No, you didn't," Olivia said, not unkindly but without softness. "You assumed something, and instead of speaking up when things started to go wrong, you went silent." The words landed gently, but they burned. At that moment, the security guard who had been stationed near the door took a few cautious steps closer. His name tag read R. Jenkins, and his eyes darted between Thomas and Olivia. It was clear he had been called not for security but for intimidation, though now he looked unsure of why he was even there. "Is everything all right here, ma'am?" he asked, his voice a mixture of professionalism and sudden nervousness. Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "No," she said simply. "Everything is not all right." Thomas finally found his voice, though it quivered slightly. "Miss Bennett, I sincerely apologize. I didn't recognize you when you came in, and the policy just—" "There was no policy issue," Olivia interrupted, her tone cool. "There was a perception issue. You didn't recognize me, so you assumed I didn't belong. You assumed I needed to be questioned, vetted, and cornered. If I'd walked in wearing a suit, or if my skin looked different, would you have asked the same questions?" Thomas opened his mouth again, but this time Olivia didn't give him the chance. "You don't need to answer, because I already know." Across the lobby, customers had stopped what they were doing. Some shifted in their seats uncomfortably. Others watched with somber expressions, perhaps thinking about the times they had seen something similar and stayed quiet. Olivia turned to Jenkins, the security guard. "There's no threat here, but if you're going to stand here, you might want to take note of what discrimination looks like in practice." He nodded slowly, shame rising behind his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Thomas' shoulders slumped, the last traces of confidence evaporating from his frame. He looked nothing like the composed branch manager from earlier. Now he looked small, like someone who had misjudged the moment so badly that even apology seemed inadequate. But Olivia didn't want his apology. She wanted accountability. And the moment for that had finally come. Olivia slowly retrieved her ID from the counter and slipped it back into her wallet with the same precision she used to sign million-dollar contracts. She straightened her cardigan and took one final look around the lobby, a space she had once envisioned as a welcoming haven for the community. Today, that vision had been tainted. What happened in the last 20 minutes wasn't a fluke. It was a symptom. Turning back to Thomas, she stepped closer, not in aggression but in authority. "You will not process my withdrawal," she said quietly, "because that would be too little, too late. What you will do instead is explain your behavior, your decisions, and your biases to someone who signs your paycheck." Thomas's mouth opened, desperate to say something that might save him. "Ms. Bennett, please, if I had known—" Olivia held up a hand. "That's the point. You didn't know, and because of that you treated me like a fraud. You saw a black woman in sneakers and a cardigan and assumed I didn't belong here. That's not just bad customer service, Thomas. That's systemic bias in real time." Emily looked away, cheeks flushed. Even the other customers in the lobby lowered their gazes, as if the truth in Olivia's words was too sharp to stare at directly. A sudden rustle behind the counter pulled everyone's attention. From a side door, the assistant branch manager, Rachel Monroe, stepped out, her face tense with confusion. She had clearly overheard enough to know things had gone terribly wrong. "What's going on here?" she asked, eyes moving from Olivia to Thomas. Before Thomas could respond, Olivia answered, "I'll explain. I'm Olivia Bennett, founder and CEO of Bennett Financial. I came in today as a customer to make a withdrawal from my personal account. What I got was interrogation, suspicion, and condescension. I was treated like a criminal in the very institution I built." Rachel blinked, stunned. "You're the CEO?" "Yes," Olivia said firmly, "and I suggest you pull the footage from your security cameras before it magically disappears." Thomas looked like he'd swallowed glass. The air in the lobby shifted again. This time, it wasn't just discomfort, it was consequence. Reality had landed. Olivia stepped away from the counter, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let this be a lesson. We don't fix bias with policies on paper. We fix it when people are held accountable, publicly." And with that, she walked toward the doors, head high, while Thomas remained rooted in place, silent, pale, and exposed. The next morning, Olivia Bennett didn't go into her executive office with a smile. She didn't take calls or ease into the day with a cup of espresso in hand. Instead, she gathered her executive team in the boardroom, early, unannounced, and with a folder thick with notes and screenshots. Her calm was gone, replaced by a kind of purpose that made silence stretch long and heavy between her words. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "We say we stand for dignity," Olivia began, looking each executive in the eye. "But yesterday, one of our own branches proved otherwise. I walked in as a customer and walked out as a case study in bias." A few of them shifted uncomfortably. Some didn't dare move at all. "From this moment on," she continued, her tone clipped and clear, "bias training is no longer optional. It's mandatory. Every manager, every teller, every person who interacts with customers will attend. And not just a one-time seminar. Quarterly training, tracked, measured, and enforced." One executive tentatively raised a hand. "Will there be disciplinary consequences for what happened yesterday?" Olivia's gaze hardened. "Thomas Carr is no longer with the company, and neither is anyone who enabled that behavior without stepping in." There was no room for debate. She leaned forward, voice firm. "We will not become another financial institution where prejudice hides behind protocol. We are better than that. Or we will be, starting today." By noon, the announcement had gone out to all employees. Internally, the story spread like wildfire, and though Olivia never mentioned the branch publicly, word got out. It always does. Customers noticed. So did the media. But Olivia didn't care about headlines. This wasn't about saving face. It was about honoring her own mission, the mission she nearly saw destroyed in the lobby of her own bank. And from that day forward, no one would ever question whether Olivia Bennett belonged. Not again. Weeks passed, but the ripple effect of that afternoon at the branch had only just begun. At Davis Financial headquarters, the culture was shifting. Quietly at first, then undeniably. Branch managers began holding roundtable discussions with their teams. Training modules on bias and equitable service were no longer boxed in as HR formalities. They became conversations. Real ones. Uncomfortable ones. Necessary ones. Olivia Bennett didn't make herself the center of the story, but everyone knew. Word had traveled. Not just of her identity, but of how she had chosen to respond. Not with anger, not with legal threats, but with unwavering leadership and accountability. The branch where it all happened was under new management now. The lobby had been redesigned, but it wasn't just the furniture that changed. It was the tone. Customers noticed it. A warmth at the counter. A second glance that wasn't suspicion but recognition. A welcome back that meant something. Sophia Langley, the teller who had once silently stood by as the fiasco unfolded, had remained. Not because Olivia had spared her, but because Sophia had asked to stay. To learn. To do better. And she had. One afternoon, Olivia returned to that same branch. This time, she wore a bright red suit and walked in with intention. Customers and staff alike stood a little straighter as she entered. Sophia, standing behind the counter, met her eyes and offered a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Bennett," she said, her voice sure, not stiff. "Welcome back." Olivia smiled, not out of pride, but something deeper. Because progress wasn't about punishing people for failing to see, it was about making sure they never missed it again. And the next time a woman walked into that bank, whether she wore sneakers or stilettos, she would be seen, heard, and respected. That was Olivia's legacy now, and it had only just begun. What happened inside that quiet bank lobby echoed far beyond those 4 marble walls. News of the incident didn't stay local. It circulated on social media, in community forums, and eventually in industry leadership circles. Articles appeared, "When the CEO walks in," a cautionary tale on assumptions, and "The bank built on respect," how Olivia Bennett turned a moment into a movement. But for Olivia, it was never about going viral. It was about principle. It was about what gets overlooked when we make snap judgments, when uniforms, skin tones, or casual clothes outweigh credentials, titles, or truth. In private, she reflected on the irony. She had built an institution to serve everyone equally, only to be treated like an outsider in her own house. And that, more than anything, fueled her next step. Olivia created a new internal division, client advocacy and accountability. Its mission? To ensure no customer, regardless of appearance, background, or circumstance, would ever feel unseen again. And for every employee who asked, "How could we have known?" her answer was simple. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. You just needed to choose it." Respect, after all, is not a response to power. It's a reflection of character. And that's what Olivia set out to rebuild. Banking, from the inside out. In a world where assumptions are often made before words are spoken, Olivia Bennett's story reminds us that true leadership doesn't always wear a suit or demand recognition. It's in how we respond when no one's watching, and how we choose to stand when it's our turn to speak up. This story isn't just about one woman reclaiming her power. It's about all of us recognizing the quiet, everyday moments where bias still lurks and dignity is tested. In our workplaces, banks, neighborhoods, respect should never be a privilege reserved for the few, but a baseline offered to all. So ask yourself, how would you have treated Olivia if she stood before you today? If this story moved you, inspired you, or challenged your thinking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Together we can amplify voices that deserve to be heard and maybe, just maybe, change the way we all do business.